Today I'm going to be going over the Petasis olefination and the Tebbe olefination. The Petasis and Tebbe olefination reactions are commonly used in organic syntheses for the methylation of carbonyl compounds. Both the Petasis and Tebbe reagents can be made from a titanium metal complex with 2 cyclopentadienyls and 2 chlorines. The Petasis reagent contains 2 CH2R groups. This reagent transforms into a titanium carbenoid with an R group attached, and which can then react with our carbonyl compound. The product of this reaction then contains a methylene and an R group. With the Tebbe olefination, we start with the same starting material. The Tebbe reagent contains a second metal complex with aluminum, and one of the methyl groups attaches to titanium here. And this carbon will be added to our final product. This reagent transforms into a titanium carbenoid as well, but with this olefination, there can be no R groups attached. The Tebbe olefination can only add methylene, while the Petasis olefination can add R groups as well. And when this reacts with our carbonyl, we're left with an olefin with just the methylene, as you can see here. I'm going to talk about a few of the differences between the Petasis olefination and the Tebbe olefination. The Petasis reagent tends to work well with ketones, aldehydes, and amides, while it doesn't work as well with esters. But I actually found with the total synthesis I did for our last project that the Petasis reagent was used for an ester, but in general, it's less commonly used for esters. The Tebbe reagent tends to work well with ketones and esters. The Petasis reagent can add a carbon attached to an R group, while the Tebbe reagent can only add a single carbon. With the first example I showed you guys, the carbonyl compounds were methylenated, but with the Petasis, we saw our R group attached, and then with the Tebbe, we only saw a single carbon. Here's a practice problem for distinguishing the Petasis olefination and the Tebbe olefination. Here we have our starting carbonyl compound, and our final product is an olefin. Our reagent is CP2TiMe2. One thing to point out is that we're not going to be able to differentiate whether it's the Petasis or the Tebbe based on our final product because there is no R group attached. We only have a single carbon here. So we're going to have to determine it based on our reagent. So I want you guys to think about whether this reagent is the Petasis reagent or the Tebbe reagent. This reaction is a Petasis olefination. And we know this because the Petasis reagent is CP2TiMe2. If this were a Tebbe olefination, our reagent would have been CP2TiCH2AlCH32, and that contains our 2 metal complexes of titanium and aluminum. And then with our Petasis, we have our single metal complex with titanium. Here, the only difference in determining whether this was a Petasis or Tebbe was our reagent, because both could produce this final product. It's important to remember that the Petasis can add R groups attached to this carbon, while the Tebbe cannot, because it can only add this carbon that's within both of the metal complexes.